single day, like I've always done and always will.
Passing these bills on the floor, making yet another stand.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Chantel Destra. During the most recent legislative session, state lawmakers voted to pass over 800 bills. While Governor Kathy Hochul has acted on majority of those bills by either signing or choosing to veto them, a good portion of those bills are still awaiting review. With just a few weeks left in the year, Hochul has until December 31st to make a decision. Many of the policy issues on the docket are extremely controversial, including the medical aid in dying bill, the criminal justice omnibus package, part of the New York HEAT Act, and reproductive health legislation. For more on all of the controversial bills left to be reviewed by the governor, here's our Elise Klein with a deep dive.
During the most recent legislative session, New York State lawmakers passed 856 bills in both houses. Before the end of the year, the governor must review those bills. So far, she signed into law more than half, with more than 200 bills left. She has vetoed 29 bills so far, not including individual budget line items, according to data from New York State Watch. One of the bills vetoed by the governor would have allowed for some insurance companies to include coverage for services provided by pharmacists related to contraceptives. The bill aims to increase the number of pharmacists offering contraception in a non-patient-specific standing order and increase reimbursement for pharmacists dispensing contraceptives. State Senator James Skoufis, a Democrat representing parts of Orange County and a lead sponsor of the bill in the Senate, said in a statement that New York must remain a bulwark against attempts to roll back access to reproductive health care. Assemblymember John McDonald, a Democrat representing parts of the Capital Region and a lead sponsor of the bill in the Assembly, echoes a similar reaction.
My big concern in healthcare in general, and specifically when it comes to women's healthcare, is that there are barriers being put up for women, particularly in urban and rural areas. And I think we need to make sure that they have access to care that's appropriate.
The governor's veto message states the bill would require health insurers to update their medical billing systems and add administrative burden costs and increase costs from pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. The governor's message also highlights that she signed the Birth Control Access Act in 2023, which allows pharmacists to dispense self-administered hormonal contraceptives with outpatient orders from a physician. Some state lawmakers who voted against the bill, like State Senator George Borrello, a Republican representing parts of the Finger Lakes, agree with the governor's veto, concerned about PBMs.
Anything that puts more money in their pockets, quite frankly, is I'm opposed to.
McDonald says while he understands where the governor's concerns are, he argues against the scale, disputing that this legislation would have dramatically increased costs.
I don't know if this is as monumental, to be honest with you. That being said, I also know enough that you live for another day and you work on improving things. I'm working with the advocates to see what else we can do to make sure that this has an opportunity to become law.
This veto bill may have stirred some controversy, but more controversy might be headed the governor's way after she reviews other controversial bills before the end of the year. There are a handful of bills the governor has yet to act on around heated issues such as end of life, transitioning away from gas heat, wrongful deaths, and more. One of the bills that awaits the governor's approval would legalize medical aid in dying, an issue many lawmakers are split on. If signed, the legislation would allow New Yorkers with a terminal diagnosis of 6 months or less to live to request an oral medication to end their life. This is a bill that advocates and some lawmakers have tried to pass for nearly a decade. It just passed both houses for the first time this year. Cassandra Johnston, a cancer patient and advocate, says if the governor signs this bill, it would mean she's the governor who they thought she was and who they voted for.
I feel very proud to watch her over the past couple of years. And I hope that she makes not just the right decision, but the compassionate decision and the one that New Yorkers want.
According to a 2025 Siena poll, 54% of voters support medical aid in dying. Johnston says they would be devastated if this bill is vetoed, adding even though the advocate is doing well now, that doesn't mean they don't want the choice should they get worse. Assemblymember Amy Paulin, a Democrat representing parts of Westchester County and a lead sponsor of the bill for many years, says the signing of this bill would have a significant impact.
It'll just alleviate so much pain and suffering for New Yorkers. It's immeasurable.
The Assemblymember adds they have been engaged with the governor's office and she's hopeful. But some advocates and state lawmakers are rooting for a veto. Jessica Rogers, Coalition's director for the Patients' Rights Action Fund, says they're hoping the governor will veto the legislation that they feel is dangerous.
This is a piece of legislation. It's very poorly written. It does not protect patients. The safeguards, supposed safeguards, are really just smokescreens that protect the physicians that participate, and they don't protect the vulnerable patients that need true compassion and support.
Rogers says she worries about patients with large financial stress or medical bills taking the medical aid and dying choice if given the option. Senator Borrello, who voted against the bill, says he opposes the bill because he views it as assisted suicide and feels the bill goes too far compared to other bills on this topic in other states.
First and foremost, there is no requirement for a mental health evaluation. These life-ending drugs can be prescribed by telemedicine. There's no chain of custody for the drugs themselves.
The legislation includes safeguards, such as requiring a terminal diagnosis, needing 2 doctors to sign off, having 2 witnesses at the time of request, and having the medication be self-administered. The legislation also requires set responsibilities for the physician, including offering an opportunity for the patient to change their mind and/or rescind their request before prescribing the lethal medication, and if needed, referring the patient to a mental health professional for determination of their mental capacity. Another piece of legislation dealing with death awaiting the governor's review, the Grieving Families Act, would give families the ability to sue for wrongful death damages based on emotional anguish, suffering, and grief. Currently, the state only allows wrongful death suits to hand out damages based on economic or pecuniary loss. New York is one of only 2 states in the country with this kind of legal statute. This is a bill the governor has vetoed 3 times before, with the concern about the health industry and increased insurance premiums. For Bruce McIntyre, currently engaged in a wrongful death lawsuit, this legislation means families like his could at least see some accountability for their loss.
It would allow for my family to, sue for grief and anguish. It'll allow families like mine to be seen.
McIntyre's 26-year-old partner, Amber Rose Isaac, died in 2020 from a rare and life-threatening pregnancy complication and health condition called HELLP syndrome. HELLP syndrome can cause blood and liver problems if left untreated. McIntyre says they felt ignored by their physicians. McIntyre says he lost his partner and the mother of his child. He continues to struggle with grief years later. He says he's frustrated and concerned about this bill being vetoed again.
My grief isn't seen by the system, by the state of New York. And that hurts. That really stings. There's something that I wake up with every single day. It's been 5 years. I'm still having trouble sleeping in a room that me and Amber once shared. I have to crash on the couch sometimes because I can't even sleep in my room.
McIntyre adds his pain isn't the only pain being ignored. His 5-year-old son, Elias, also suffers.
And my son is always constantly asking questions about his mom. It's really sad to hear him, talk about how his mother passed away when, other kids are asking about his mom.
The legislation has bipartisan support, including co-sponsors from across the aisle. Lawmakers who support the bill say New York families deserve more support from the state. State Senator Dean Murray, a Republican representing parts of Suffolk County and a co-sponsor of the bill, says the governor's vetoes over the years on this bill sends a clear message.
The message she is sending to crime victims in New York is she doesn't care.
State Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel, a Democrat representing parts of Manhattan and a lead sponsor of the bill, says the nearly 200-year-old legal statute continues to cause families additional pain.
It discriminates against children, seniors, women, people of color, and those who are traditionally undervalued in our society. So it's time we update that law and step with 48 other states.
Some opponents of the bill worry the language is too general and could increase costs, similar to the governor's veto message last year.
I think that for it to be a bill that I could support, the language would have to be tightened up substantially more so than it is right now.
Hoylman-Siegel argues other states that have updated their legal statutes have not faced increased costs on insurance premiums. Many advocates and lawmakers are also hoping the governor signs a prison reform omnibus bill that aims to achieve more transparency and accountability for correctional services. The omnibus bill has several parts that, if signed, would enact requiring correctional facilities to adhere to certain camera footage, recording, and investigative standards, notice of death in facility custody, comprehensive studies on death in correctional facilities, expanding membership of the State Commission of Corrections, visits by the Correctional Association of New York, and more. The bill has components of other bills that have failed to make it out of committee last year. The bill passing this year came after the violent and tragic death of Robert Brooks, an inmate at Marcy Correctional Facility in Oneida County. State Senator Julia Salazar, a Democrat representing parts of Brooklyn and a sponsor of the legislation, said in a statement sent to WMHT that this bill would be a serious step for prison reform and it must be signed into law. Assemblymember Gabriela Romero, a Democrat representing parts of the Capital Region who voted for the legislation, says this is a bill that just makes sense.
For example, there's one of the bills that are included in the omnibus would give families that have members that are incarcerated that pass away, they would just be able to notify families quicker of the member that's incarcerated that passes. That's common sense. And so it's things like that that we really just need, especially after the death of Robert Brooks. Constituents are demanding more accountability.
Some lawmakers who voted against the bill hope the governor vetoes it.
It's just another example of my colleagues going too far. There are things in this that I can support. Anything that improves transparency and accountability, video recording and so forth. Absolutely. But what I can't support is the expansion, of this corrections committee that is really just a group of far left advocates.
While many advocates feel this bill didn't go far enough to address prison reform, Jamie Bailey Warren, a criminal justice advocate, says this legislation, if signed, would be a start to meaningful change.
And for me, and so many people that, do the criminal justice reform advocacy for the Brooks family, it will make us feel like Robert's death hasn't been in vain.
Another bill awaiting the governor's review aims to help the state begin to transition away from gas heat and improve energy affordability. The NY Heat Act, a part of it, was passed this year. The bill would eliminate what is called the 100-foot rule, a cross-subsidy that allows New York residential ratepayers to avoid paying for the cost of a new gas line if they live within 100 feet of an existing one. This means that for all other ratepayers, prices are higher. Liz Moran, an advocate with Earth Justice, says the 100-foot rule is an outdated subsidy, highlighting other states have signed laws to revise this rule.
This is an outdated fee that requires everyday New Yorkers to cover the costs of needless expansion of gas infrastructure.
The bill has strong support among Democrats and strong opposition from Republicans. Senator Borrello argues natural gas is the most affordable form of energy.
Natural gas is the most affordable and the most reliable way to heat your home in New York, and we're heavily dependent on it in upstate New York, particularly here in Western New York, where we have an abundance of natural gas. So this is not about affordability or saving consumers money.
State Senator Liz Krueger, a Democrat representing parts of Manhattan and a lead sponsor of the bill, argues this argument is tired and untrue. The senator says this legislation could save New Yorkers hundreds of millions of dollars.
Research over and over from around this country, from around the state, from around the world, is that multiple forms of heating are less expensive than gas. Is gas less expensive than oil? Most days, most areas, probably. But our choices are not gas or oil. They are everything, and then gas and oil, which are the most polluting and most expensive.
Krueger says she has been in three-way conversations with the governor's office and the assembly on this bill and is feeling optimistic.
There have been some proposed changes that would delay implementation a bit longer than I would have preferred, but I'll take this, no problem. So I am optimistic we will see the governor signing this bill very soon.
The governor has until the end of the year to review the remaining bills before the next session begins. If she vetoes some of these controversial bills, lawmakers will have to come back in January with a new plan. Elise Klein, New York Now.
And for more information on those bills, you can visit our website. That's at nynow.org. Now turning to another topic. This year marks the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. New York has a deeply celebrated place in the history of the American Revolution, with the historic Battle of Saratoga in 1777 and a slew of historic sites from the war across the state. In this next segment, we'll take a look at how New York is upholding the legacy of the Revolutionary War, from exhibits at the State Museum to telling the stories of the everyday people who were vital to America's victory. Here's that story. The year 2025 marks a historic year for the United States of America, with the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. The Revolutionary War, which served as the catalyst for modern America's fight for independence from Great Britain, lasted about 8 years, from 1775 to 1783. Maeve Kane, an associate history professor at SUNY Albany, says the significance of the history and legacy of the Revolutionary War cannot be overstated.
The American Revolution is probably one of the most radically significant events in human history. The idea that all people should have a say in their government, that all people should participate in the government, and the American Revolution puts that into action as the first step towards that. So with the Declaration of Independence in 1776 through to the writing of the Constitution in the 1780s, the American Revolution is really about who has the right to govern themselves and how do people claim that and make space for themselves in the government.
SUNY Albany Associate History Professor and Cultural Historian Christopher Pastore says the 250th anniversary is important because it reminds the country and the world about the journey of the United States becoming independent.
This is a celebration of people who came together in search of creating a democratic republic. Now, at the time of the American Revolution, they were fighting, at least initially, to restore what they imagined as their British liberties. But over time, it became apparent that independence was necessary. And with that, they sought to create something new.
Many modern-day historians assert that one of the reasons that the Revolutionary War is often regarded as groundbreaking is because of the nature of the war. The war turned brother against brother and neighbor against neighbor, all based on ideology. Americans were met with a choice between fighting for independence or being British patriot loyalists. Christopher Brown, a British Empire historian and professor with Columbia University, underscores that significance.
I think people need to understand that the American Revolution was a real war with, over the course of 8 years, which is a long time, more than 100,000 dead on both sides, British, patriot, loyalist, Native American. Sometimes the ideals and the values that come out are legacies of the revolution. We forget just how bloody it was. And it was really neighbor versus neighbor. In some ways, it was even more of a civil war than the Civil War because you had communities fighting with each other, not just a kind of sectional division between North and South.
And Professor Pastore underscored the sentiment that the Revolutionary War was more than a war between the colonies and the British Empire. It also has deep history involving New York State.
The American Revolution wasn't just a war between the colonies and Britain itself. It was a partisan war of neighbor versus neighbor. And we see this in sharp relief in New York. Where patriots and Tories were fighting one another, up and down the Hudson River Valley and across New York in quite often quite violent ways.
In New York, the state's role in the Revolutionary War is one that is not just acknowledged, but also celebrated. Historians see New York as playing a central role in the war. One example of the state's role is the infamous Battle of Saratoga in 1777. Historians also point to the Sullivan-Clinton expedition as another New York pivotal moment in the war.
New York is the key to the continent. The British knew that if they lost the geography of New York, they would lose the war. So that's why you see some of the major campaigns fought here. The New York campaign in 1776, the battles of Saratoga in 77, and the Sullivan-Clinton campaign of the Continental Army against the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois in 1779. Like, New York is the revolution.
New Yorkers understand that New York played a pivotal role in the American Revolution. If we think about a major turning point in the War for Independence, we could say that Saratoga, again in 1777, was this, again, a pivotal point in the war that showed that Americans could beat British troops, and that the war could be won by Americans. And as a result, this brought France's involvement. And so, without French help, it's doubtful that Americans could have succeeded in the way that they did.
To commemorate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, the New York State Museum will be debuting a Revolutionary New York exhibit. Aaron Noble, who serves as a senior historian and curator with the New York State Museum, unpacks the exhibit.
So we're incredibly excited that we're finally seeing the process come to life, and to be able to present this work to the New York visitors. The exhibit will focus on New York as its pivotal central theater of the American Revolution, the fact that the turning point of the American Revolution happened just north of Albany at Saratoga in 1777, and then New York's revolutionary story really covers the entirety of the conflict from 1775 to the evacuation of New York City in 1783. No other state can really cover every aspect of the war through its history the way that New York can.
The exhibit will feature the Revolutionary War gunboat, and it will also bring museum visitors through the history from the Revolutionary War to present day. Another exhibit is the George Washington and American Paradox exhibit. General Washington is known as the great American leader of the American Revolution, but Washington was also a complex individual. The exhibit offers a complete history to the life of Washington as well as his contributions to the war. Professor Brown says the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War is an opportunity to continue researching and diving into the different stories that make up the war.
I do think that there can be a little bit of a sense with the American Revolution that we already know what that is. We already know what that's about. And I think as folks begin to scratch the surface and dig into both local resources and national resources, they will discover all kinds of stories and perspectives and vantage points and insights that are unfamiliar, and hopefully will inspire curiosity to learn more and to build on that revolutionary heritage.
Many historians say it's also important to highlight the different demographic groups that were pivotal to the war and highlight the figures beyond the founding fathers. Associate History Professor Carl Bontempo underscored the importance of telling the stories of everyday people that fought in the war.
Maybe one of the larger gaps in how we think this stuff through is that, there's a sort of focus. I'll call it a focus on the founders, right? And so this idea that the founding generation, right, is what we should think about when we think about the American Revolution. But also, a lot of scholarship and what historians research and think about is about maybe other people who contributed to the revolution. Sort of everyday folks, right? And thinking about the ways in which, just American women and enslaved African Americans, free Blacks, also Native Americans, all played a role in that revolutionary moment, right? And I think sometimes I wish that that part of the story was more part of the public's discussion. Because I think what happens then is that we end up sort of lionizing the founding generation. And you turn them almost into the statues that we see of them. And statues are hard to relate to.
And with the rich history of the American Revolution, historians can agree that so much can be gained from unpacking the impact and legacy of the war in present day. They assert that it's important for historians to continue looking at that history in the years to come.
There's so many lessons to be taken from the era of the war. And America has always been an experiment and also an aspiration. And so in that sense, the American Revolution is really never ending.
And for more information on the anniversary of the American Revolution, you can visit our website. Again, that's at nynow.org. Well, that does it for this edition of New York Now. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.
Funding for New York Now is provided by WNET,